Hi, my name is Jaylun Hutchison. I am a senior at Gonzaga University studying communication studies and political science. My capstone project is about the president's communication on Twitter, especially after this COVID-19 pandemic. Initially, my research was going to be rooted more largely in the president's communication on Twitter. He's been noted and touted by many news sources as the Twitter president. And I was really fascinated by this. In my research, I found much correlation between activity and engagement online and polling numbers and the amount of people willing to turn out and organize for this candidate. And so seeing him in action as president and the evolution or lack thereof of communication on this, what we've come to see be a revolutionary medium, is super interesting to me. The president has been able to create this persona of himself out of social media. This persona is one that operates through a performance that conveys authority, credibility, and social attractiveness in a variety of different ways. And those are kind of the characteristics of communication that interest me in terms of performance and conveyance. Alternatively, the ability to bypass the media and speak directly to the people as President of the United States is a feature that is unique to this president. Within the genre of presidential communication, the media is a very necessary component of that formula. And to be able to see a president who doesn't engage with the media in the same way and speaks using the internet and other microblogging outlets to communicate directly to the public is a new phenomenon that I don't think we've seen before. Rapidly evolving social media technologies have emboldened the impact that online activity has. For example, one of its biggest strengths in speed is also one of its biggest weaknesses in the same time of fact checking. Twitter is the fastest breaking news source in the world. And I think coming to grips with that and conceptualizing that and trying to strengthen our media literacy is a big part of that. And that is one of the outcomes I hope that my intervention has. Actually, my project was going to be more rooted in just general presidential communication via Twitter. As I said, the president has been noted as the first Twitter president and has used the platform in an unprecedented way, unlike his predecessor, Barack Obama. However, as the semester continued, I found myself being increasingly intrigued by the development of the president's rhetoric around the coronavirus. Initially, it was a hoax and not a big deal. And obviously, we kind of now know that that's not true. So methods that I used to research the president's communication were both rooted in a historical and a textual analytical framework to break down the significance of the tweets, both with and without context, because as I found in my observation, they would communicate very different messages depending on if the audience was inundated with context versus without. So the bulk of my work is going to be analyzing this series of texts that I've identified. I feel like these 4 tweets from January 24th to April 17th really identify the evolution of the White House's rhetoric regarding COVID-19. In addition, I decided to use genre and situational rhetorical critical methods to analyze more of the syntactual message behind what the president was saying. What did certain capital letters mean in this context? What is he referring to with this punctuation? Things that, without a detailed lens to the text, one might miss. So to more directly address my first research question, how does President Donald Trump's use of Twitter impact presidential authority? I think he's largely able to expand presidential authority in a lot of ways. Though, like Dr. Schmidt says in my podcast, I think it does depend on the audience. I think the average news listener based on polls that I cite in my research, does not necessarily believe the president's word regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. However, he does have a substantial amount of authority in commanding what happens. He is the head of the company. He is the top of the tower. He is the originator of the stay-at-home orders. That I believe that my research demonstrates that he is able to bypass the news media in a lot of ways and speak directly over them and just to the people, sidestepping a mechanism that is traditionally used to hold elected officials accountable. That is a tremendous expansion of authority. Research question 2. How has Donald Trump's use of Twitter during the coronavirus pandemic shaped his credibility? Again, this is largely along party lines, but more generally, I would say that his communication and use of Twitter has damaged his credibility quite a bit. Oftentimes, you can find the president, and I cite many times in my research, countering recommendations from that of his own task force, countering recommendations from that of his own elected medical professionals. One of the biggest actors on the national stage that we have seen representing the Trump administration is Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx. As tokens and symbols of credibility, they operate on a level, but as far as his Twitter communication goes, they have not necessarily improved his credibility. I think the abundance of contradiction and misinformation spread from the Trump administration in response to the COVID-19, both immediately and still trickling out as the response continues. I think the president's use of Twitter has largely damaged his credibility. RQ3, how does Donald Trump's communication on Twitter impact his perceived social attractiveness? This was one of the most interesting questions for me to approach in my research, as I've always known social attractiveness to be more of a subjective term. Yet, my observations have suggested that President Trump's social attractiveness via Twitter is largely along party lines. By and Svensson say receivers would assume that communicators similar to them could better understand or emphasize with their concerns, which is also why they are more open to accept proposals from similar communicators. Per observation of polls cited by the White House, as well as engagement with the president's tweets, the president seems to be much more socially attractive to conservatives rather than liberals, in this time specifically with regard to the speed of the White House's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So my intervention initially was going to be broadcast on the IZAG radio. I wanted this to positively impact the Gonzaga community. I wanted to address lack of social literacy and encourage, hopefully, our community at large to get involved and try to apply a more critical lens to political materials disseminated over Twitter and the internet at large. However, given the situation with COVID-19, I wasn't able to do this. But the first learning outcome, which is create a specific communication intervention that is responsive to a complex, authentic social encounter by serving as a mechanism to decode political communication over Twitter. Political language has a long history of being difficult to understand and reserved for those directly responsible for shaping the law. Since the nature of American politics relies on principles of democracy, the idea that the public determines the larger outcome is significant. This project will be a digestible discussion of the president's COVID-19 communication and its efficacy. My project addresses the second learning outcome, which is engage in communication inquiry projects addressing communication phenomena by tackling a relatively new area of study such as Twitter communication. Further, it engages with phenomena of the President of the United States performing various informal social norms on the platform. As scholar Brian Ott describes Twitter norms as impulsive and crude, Sarah Ahmadian describes the president's language as informal and grandiose. So we can kind of see this lineup there. I fulfill a third outcome by applying rhetorical analysis and practical critique to a phenomenon that fundamentally altered civic life, COVID-19. And finally, in my introduction primarily, I frame myself as a student who is specifically interested in the arena of digital communication and a person who is impacted by the actions of the Trump administration in response to the pandemic. This is reinforced through my continued reference to my professor and other experts in the field throughout my project. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my description of my capstone project, and I hope you enjoy.